界初衛星データ放送か。これからは宇宙からゲームが降ってくるってわけだ。
その通り。このサテラビューをスーパーファミコンと合体させて BS 受信システムに接続すれば、タモリや内田有紀らがお送りする超面白ゲームプログラムが毎日無料で楽しめる。聞く、見る、遊ぶ、参加する。サテラビュー。
Hello YouTubers, it's me, you and me too, and welcome back to From Concept to Console. Say, have you noticed that Nintendo seem to love sticking stuff on the bottom of their consoles? Seriously, let's list off some of the stuff. There was the N64 disc drive, then the Famicom, yeah, that had a disc drive, the Game Boy Player for the GameCube, that was on the bottom, and the Circle Pad Pro for the 3DS, don't even get me started on the XL. Heck, the Wii even had that useless stand as a base. Then there was that Unreleased SNES disc drive, which went, you guessed it, on the bottom. But that's a long story, which I think we'll save for another day. No, today we're talking about a SNES device that was released. Meet the Satellaview. Now, before you retro gamers jump in your car and rush off to the local game shop to demand from the shopkeep, hey, where's my Satellaview at? Well, it was only released in Japan in 1995. So, unless you've got a time machine, you're not going to be able to use it. But that doesn't answer the question of, well, what is a Satellaview? Well, I'm glad you asked. A Satellaview is a satellite modem add-on. Now, I know that doesn't quite answer your question, so meet Wow Wow. It's a Japanese TV network, and they had a subdivision called St. Giga, which tackled radio for them. St. Giga made a deal with Nintendo, and together they made Satellaview. For the price of 14,000 to 8,000 yen, that's about 105 to 130 pounds or 170 to 220 dollars, you could buy one, and then each day St. Giga would broadcast digital magazines, audio dramas, and games. Every day would have a schedule, much like a TV channel. For example, early afternoon would be magazines, followed by a soundlink broadcast and a games broadcast at night. This changed a lot over time. This is an example from 1999. Magazines would include such things like digital copies of Famitsu and even Nintendo Power, and before the games are broadcast you get instruction manuals and the occasional strategy guide to help you through those games within the given time limit. And there was a lot of games. The logos on the screen right now are just a few examples of some of the franchises that had games made just for this system. To download them was quite simple. Obviously you'd need to purchase a Satellaview, and it comes in two main separate parts. The base, which would be attached to the SNES, and would give you access to the software. You would then download it and store it on a huge memory card, which was basically a Super Game Boy cartridge repurposed, but don't worry about that. When booting up the Satellaview, you would enter a sort of HUD world. Think a pre-Princess Peach's castle letting you go to various worlds, or a very retro-looking PlayStation home. There you'd enter your name, choose your gender, and once decided, you would go to a city. This city was called the city whose name has been stolen. It was filled with buildings, and inside the buildings you'd find things you can download and play later, like games and magazines. You'd have to schedule to when you had to go to each building, as they would change on the hour, and you could miss out if you didn't go there at the right time. They would have to particularly schedule for certain games, because those games would only be broadcast in a certain time frame. These are mainly for the audio dramas I mentioned earlier, but they're not audio dramas as you might expect. These are audio dramas in the sense that they would be played over games or over magazines. So as you played along, you would get live commentary, and the world would update live as you played. For example, say you're going in an overworld and it says a store doesn't open to a certain time. You would have to be able to come back here in real time to get into the store. At the same time, the games would often be given orchestral music, which was quite a thing for the games in the SNES. Now there's a certain set of games I'm going to focus on. These are the games in the Legend of Zelda series that was released for the system. They're commonly referred to as the BS Zeldas. There were 4 in total, one of which I'm currently doing a Let's Play for. First I'll talk about the other 3 though. The first game I'm going to talk about is actually a remake of the original Zelda game. Think of it as the Zelda series equivalent to Super Mario All-Stars, since they updated the graphics to 16 bits. One of the biggest differences, however, was that you did not play as Link. Instead you played as the male or female avatar from the City with No Name. This makes it the first Zelda game where you play as a character other than Link, and also one of the very few Zelda games where you get to control a girl, the only other one of course being Spirit Tracks. For the most part, the overall game is identical to the first Zelda, although there are a few changes, such as the fact that the rupee counter was increased to above 1000 unlike the original 255, and the overworld, well, that was pretty much the same but got scaled down a little bit, to make sure you could get to the places in the time you had. This game was released in 4 separate parts. This was the case with most BS games. Every week you get a new chapter in the title, and you could play it and try and beat it in the time you're given. One of the biggest changes from the original NES counterpart was the fact that there was live voice acting built into the game. Every few minutes the game would stop and the old man from the cave would talk to you and tell you things. Unlike the live audio dramas, the game could be played at any time providing you had it downloaded. It didn't have to be played within the specific hour time slot. The game would reach a certain amount of minutes and then freeze once the voice acting was delivered. This would be changed, however, in the later BS Zelda titles. The second BS Zelda game though was pretty much identical to the first, being a second quest variation of the map. There were no changes other than the overworld and the dungeon layout. The third BS Zelda game release was actually a direct port of A Link to the Past. There were no major changes made at all, but when you think about it, it was a really good deal at the time. You basically got this game for free as a download. Of course you did have to fork out quite a bit of money to get the software anyway, but to be honest, I would have thought it was a worthwhile deal at the time. The game is identical to the Japanese version of the game, so nothing really exciting here. Now this is the game where things begin to get really interesting, because unlike the other games, this is an original BS Zelda title. It's actually a sequel to A Link to the Past. Think of it as the Lost Zelda game if you will. It's really quite special in comparison to other Zelda games. Once again, you don't play as a Link, you play as the girl or the boy from the city whose name has been stolen, and you travel around the Link to the Past Hyrule, with some major changes in some places, such as extra shops, extra characters, and completely revamped dungeons. The most special thing about this Zelda game was that, unlike the other titles, this was one of the audio drama games. This meant there was live voice acting throughout the entire experience, not just a sudden pause when the timer arrived and then the voice acting would play. No, you would have to play this at a certain time of the day, otherwise you wouldn't get a chance to experience it. It was again split into 4 parts, and you had an hour for each one to try and get through the game. Once you were playing, almost everyone would have a voice, even the NPCs you'd talk to just through a text box, not just the main characters. This would mean that the people doing the lines would be saying these over and over and over and over and over again throughout the live broadcast. The game also featured an orchestral score, taken from the Zelda Sound and Drama CD, the A Link to the Past tracks that was. A rather nice feature is the fact that some of the minor characters from A Link to the Past get thrust into the spotlight here. For example, Shahrazrallah. In A Link to the Past he had a minor role, whereas here, along with his friend the Fortune Teller, he helps you out throughout the entire game. The goal each week is to collect tombstone tablets from 2 dungeons. Hence the game's name, BS Zelda, the Ancient Stone Tablets. With all completed, you can stop the resurrection of Ganon. One of the more interesting parts of the game is that since you're filling Link's shoes, you're constantly reminded of his deeds. Many of the characters will talk about him, which means that we can actually place us in the Zelda timeline. You see, Link at the moment is currently sitting in the middle of the ocean dreaming about an island, because Link's Awakening is taking place, which means this game could technically be considered canon. Unfortunately, unlike the other DS Zelda games, this was not replayable due to the lack of actors being there to deliver their lines. In fact, it only ever got one more rebroadcast, meaning this game could only ever be played twice in its existence. I know, talk about a rough deal. Fortunately, it's recently been rediscovered through the use of emulation after being lost for such a long time. There's even an English release of the game now, made by fans. It doesn't mean that you'll be able to hear the actors or the orchestral music, unfortunately, but you'll still get to experience the majority of the game, for after all, this is practically an official Zelda release from Nintendo. Well, there you have it, all 4 Zelda games released for the system. Although, I haven't even mentioned the coolest part of all the BS games yet, not just the Zelda ones. You see, you could actually play for prizes, real life prizes, by submitting your score once you beat a game. The higher the score, the more likely you are to win. So you could get some really cool merchandise, and it could be some of the reasons behind some unknown merchandise out there. But overall, that's pretty much it for the Satellaview. There were a lot of games for it, and it lasted a pretty long time, though sadly it eventually died out. But considering it lasted well into the GameCube era, which is, well, you know how long past the SNES era that was, is very impressive. Unfortunately, Saint Giga also died out in 2007, so it's unlikely we're ever going to see a sequel. WoW, the TV company which owns Saint Giga, still exists, but I find it very unlikely Nintendo will ever partner with them again, particularly with the online capabilities of today's consoles. But it just goes to show how interesting the early days of online for consoles were. So, hopefully you now know what the Satellaview was. If you weren't listening, it was an add-on for the Super Nintendo, one on the bottom, like so many Nintendo add-ons do. My name is Me2, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. A lot of effort goes into making them each time, so subscribe, comment, or even just a like, it really makes my day. Obviously I might have missed something, I'm no expert. If I have, tell me, but don't have a go at me, I'm only human. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all on the next From Concept to Console. Have a fantastic day.